The human diplomatic vessel appeared at the edge of the Galactic Council chambers without warning. No weapons, no shields, no escort fleets. Alien eyes widened as the ship glided through the observation window. It was sleek, modest, unarmed, unlike any other species diplomat ships, which were always armored, always bristling with weapons, always backed by fleets ready to fire at a moment's notice. Inside the council chamber, whispers spread quickly. Are they foolish? Are they insane? They come empty-handed into the heart of the council? Every other species had sent armed envoys, carrying plasma rifles, personal shields, even secret assassination devices. Humans came with nothing. The council's security officers tensed, weapons moved to alert. Sensors scanned the ship for hidden arsenals, for explosives, for traps. Nothing appeared. Inside the human ship, Ambassador Leora Kane moved quietly through the narrow corridors. Documents were neatly stacked in her hands, data chips carefully secured, no hidden compartments, no secret weapons, nothing but papers and communication devices. Her assistant, a young diplomat named Yarrick, glanced nervously at her. Do you really think this will work? He whispered. Leora smiled faintly. It has to, she said, her eyes calm, steady, unshaken by the fear around her. The ship docked. Smoothly, guided by automated council systems, which seemed surprised at the lack of force, the doors opened and humans stepped into the chamber. All eyes turned to them. Every species leaned forward, curiosity mixing with suspicion that the human ambassador did not bow deeply, did not raise weapons, did not gesture with threats. She simply raised her hand politely and said, "Greetings. We come unarmed." A silence followed, heavy and tense, as if the words themselves had weight. Sinking into the room, alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. A few laughed nervously, assuming it was a bluff, or a mistake, or ignorance. One elder from the Drail sector finally spoke. "Unarmed?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I have never heard of such recklessness. All diplomats carry weapons. It is protocol. How can you survive?" Leora's voice was calm. "Even by speaking first," she said. "By listening, by understanding, and by trusting that we can solve problems without violence." Another alien, a tall figure with gray skin and many eyes, hissed under its breath. "Trust is weakness," it said. "Do you not understand the galaxy?" Leora nodded slightly. "We understand it better than most," she replied softly. The room fell silent again. Every species trying to calculate what the humans meant, what advantage they had, or what trap they might be hiding. Council security scanned again, sensors, energy scans, everything, but found nothing unusual. Meanwhile, Leora and her team arranged their documents on a long table, maps, treaties, agreements, records of human history and human intentions, nothing to hide, nothing to fear. A nervous young delegate whispered to her neighbor, "Perhaps they are bluffing." Another shook its head. "They cannot survive this way," it said. "No species has ever entered the council unarmed and unprotected. They will be crushed if anything goes wrong." But humans moved calmly, with no fear, with no hesitation, their posture relaxed yet confident, their presence alone unsettling the room. A monitor flashed outside the chamber, showing the human ship's fleet quietly stationed beyond the council. Space, not large, not aggressive, just visible enough to remind observers that Earth's reach was not insignificant, and yet no weapons were drawn. Leora began speaking, her voice steady and soft. "Esteemed delegates, we come seeking dialogue, not conflict. We do not carry weapons because we do not believe diplomacy should begin with threat. We believe words and understanding are stronger than guns." Gasps and murmurs echoed throughout the chamber. Some delegates leaned back in disbelief. Others whispered nervously to each other, "What madness is this?" A drill general finally demanded, "Then you are defenseless." One attack and you will be destroyed. Why take such a risk? Leora met the general's gaze calmly. Because we have already survived worse, she said. Because our strength is in our unity, our preparation, our resolve. And because the galaxy will learn that weapons alone do not define power. For the first time in history, the Council did not know how to respond. No species had ever faced humans like this, so calm, so confident, so unarmed. Observers recorded every word, every gesture. Transmission feeds buzzed with confusion. Alien? Analysts argued, what are they hiding? What is their trap? But there was no trap. No bluff. No hidden arsenal. Humans had chosen transparency, trust, and patience. And the galaxy could not understand it. As the first part of the meeting concluded, Leora and her team rose. Documents presented, intentions clear, weapons non-existent. Council was left to wonder, for the first time in centuries, if a species could survive and even terrify the galaxy without ever drawing a gun. And in that silence, every delegate understood the terrifying truth. Humans did not need weapons to be dangerous. The galaxy had been warned. The council chamber buzzed with whispers long after the humans had taken their seats. Every species trying to process what they had just witnessed, a diplomat standing unarmed. No shields, no hidden weapons, no guards. Some laughed nervously, assuming it was a trick or a bluff or sheer ignorance. Ambassador Leora Kane remained calm, hands folded lightly in front of her, eyes steady, scanning the room, listening to every murmur, every subtle movement. The elder Drail delegate finally spoke. Do you not fear for your lives? Every species here carries weapons. Every diplomat is armed. You are defenseless. Leora's response was simple, calm, deliberate. We do not fear because we understand that trust can be stronger than weapons. Violence may solve the moment, but diplomacy shapes the future. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates scoffed, others frowned in confusion, and a few leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves. The council attempted intimidation next. Threats of sanctions, of exclusion, of war, they implied. Consequences if humans failed to respect protocol or if they overstepped boundaries. Humans did not flinch. No one adjusted their posture. No hand twitched toward an unseen weapon. Instead, they listened. They waited. They spoke when necessary, careful with every word, measured with precision. Leora's assistant, Yarick, whispered softly, "They are testing us. They expect weakness." Leora shook her head slightly. "No, they are testing their assumptions about us. They do not understand the human way." The humans began presenting their records, documents of past conflicts, treaties they had signed, negotiations they had successfully mediated, evidence of survival without reliance on weaponry, proof that problems could be solved without immediate force. Delegates leaned over the tables, scanning the materials, suspicion mixed with curiosity. "Is this propaganda?" one hissed. "No species could survive in the galaxy relying only on words," said another, but humans continued calmly, patiently, explaining strategies, historical examples, their principles of negotiation and foresight. One young diplomat from the Vryn sector whispered to a colleague, "They are showing strength without aggression. It is terrifying." Another delegate nodded slowly. "Their confidence is not arrogance. It is preparation." Then came a critical moment. A minor conflict on a nearby world flared. A dispute over resources threatened to erupt into open war. The council waited to see how humans would respond. Without hesitation, the human team contacted the planet's leaders, not with threats, not with weapons, but with dialogue, advice, mediation, offering solutions and alternatives. By the time the council delegates could prepare their fleets, the conflict had ended peacefully. No casualties, no destruction, only resolution. The galaxy began to murmur again, "What madness is this? They do not fight, yet they win?" The truth was sinking in slowly. Humans did not need weapons to influence outcomes. They relied on foresight, preparation, and trust, not fear, not aggression. Leora stood again, addressing the chamber. Every empire relies on force. Every diplomat carries weapons. We choose a different path. Our strength is in our preparation, our intelligence, and our ability to unite. A silence fell, heavier than before, delegates shifting uncomfortably, some realizing that humans' unarmed presence was not weakness, but a new kind of power, subtle, patient, and frightening. Even the Council's military advisors whispered to each other, "They could destroy us without firing a shot. We do not understand them, and that is dangerous." Outside the chamber, observers and analysts tried to make sense of it all, sending messages, debating strategies, but the more they analyzed, the more they realized their assumptions were wrong. Humans had no weapons, yet they had influence, strategy, and control over outcomes without aggression, and the galaxy began to understand a terrifying new possibility. Human diplomacy itself could be a weapon, stronger than fleets, shields, or armies, because humans did not need to strike first. They could win through patience, foresight, and trust. And that thought sent shivers across every empire that believed weapons were everything. The galaxy had expected humans to be weak, naive, easily manipulated, or crushed at the first sign of aggression. They were wrong. From the observation decks of council chambers, analysts watched the human fleet in orbit, small, unassuming ships. No weapons visible, no signs of massive defense systems, yet every movement was precise, controlled, deliberate. The aliens whispered among themselves, "Where is their firepower? How can they stand unarmed against the council fleets?" But the truth was hidden in plain sight. Human diplomats were backed by something no one could see. Not just by their fleets, but by intelligence networks that spanned the galaxy, by surveillance systems that tracked threats before they emerged, by logistics and planning that anticipated every move. Even the smallest human vessel could be a command center, coordinating dozens of others silently, guiding them to neutralize threats before they even appeared. When a conflict erupted on a distant mining colony, the galaxy expected humans to fail, expected them to call in armed ships, to fight with weapons and fear. Instead, human diplomats intervened through communication channels, negotiating with the colony leaders, analyzing the attackers' strategies, sending subtle signals to guide the situation toward peace. The attackers hesitated, confused, unable to understand how humans could resolve the crisis without combat, unable to comprehend that humans were always 3 steps ahead, and that their apparent defenselessness was the very reason they could succeed. Back in the council chamber, alien delegates leaned forward in disbelief. "This is impossible," one said. "No species has ever survived without weapons. They must be hiding something." But there was nothing hidden. Nothing except preparation, coordination, and patience. A scout fleet from a neighboring empire attempted a test, flying near human borders to see how quickly they would respond. Sensors detected minimal defensive maneuvers. Weapons remained offline. Yet by the time the scouts reached human space, they found themselves surrounded. Not by firepower, but by control, by fleets repositioned silently, by communication networks predicting every move, by humans who knew their every step before it happened. Every alien officer who observed this shivered in disbelief. The humans were unarmed, yet unstoppable. Their strength hidden, invisible, terrifying. Commander Yurek, assisting Ambassador Kane, explained to a colleague, "They do not need to carry weapons. Our people have survived harsh worlds, disasters, and wars. We rely on unity and foresight. That is our weapon. Council members argued amongst themselves. Some called it bluff, some called it luck. But each new example proved otherwise. When a pirate fleet attempted to raid a human trading station, no human ship fired a shot. Yet the pirates surrendered peacefully, guided by invisible calculations, surrounded by coordination they could not perceive, completely outmaneuvered without violence. The galaxy began to realize something frightening. Humans could control outcomes, not through brute force, not through intimidation, but through intelligence, anticipation, and trust. Every empire that relied on fleets, guns, and fear now felt exposed. Their assumptions about power were shattered. Their strategies suddenly obsolete. Leora Kane addressed the council, calmly presenting her data. Every empire in this chamber believes power comes from weapons. We have shown that it can come from planning, unity, and trust. We do not need to strike first because we prevent conflict before it begins. That is our strength. A murmur ran through the chamber. Delegates whispered to each other, some pale, some furious, some unable to comprehend it fully. Outside, sensors picked up human ships quietly moving into new positions. Still unarmed, still calm, every step precise, every signal calculated. The galaxy began to fear what it could not see. And it understood, finally, that human diplomacy was not a weakness. It was the deadliest weapon of all. The galaxy had begun to understand. Humans did not fight the way other species did. They did not rely on fleets, shields, or weapons, yet somehow they controlled outcomes, reshaped events, and avoided chaos where others expected war. It began with a small dispute on a mining world. Two alien factions argued over resources, blasters were raised, threats exchanged. The council expected the humans to intervene with fleets, to take sides, or at least protect their own. But the human diplomats acted differently. Ambassador Kane's voice came through comm channels. Calm and deliberate, she did not threaten. She did not demand compliance, she simply listened. She asked questions that forced each side to explain their priorities, to justify their fears, to recognize the consequences of open conflict. Slowly, imperceptibly, the factions began to shift, moving toward compromise, guided by humans they had never met. Across orbit, human ships hovered silently, not firing, not threatening, but ready to respond in ways the aliens could not detect. Sensors, communication nodes, and hidden rapid response units created a net of control invisible to observers. Containing chaos without violence, the council members gasped. Even the most skeptical generals whispered to each other, they do not need to fight. And yet they win. A second test came quickly. A notorious pirate fleet had been raiding trade lanes. No empire had been able to stop them for months. When humans arrived, they did not engage with lasers or missiles. Instead, human diplomats contacted the pirate leaders directly, appealing to logic, self-interest, and reputation. Simultaneously, small, unarmed human ships repositioned near key points, invisible to scanners, blocking escape routes without firing a shot. Within hours, the pirates surrendered, not through fear, not through force, but through recognition that resistance was futile. The galaxy was shocked. Reports spread quickly. Every empire learned the terrifying truth: humans could achieve victory without violence. Their diplomacy itself was a weapon, stronger than fleets of thousands of warships, and centuries of conquest. Ambassador Kane addressed the council directly. Every empire here believes power comes from fear. We show a different path. We do not need to strike first, because we anticipate threats, prepare, and guide outcomes before conflict begins. Our diplomacy is our shield and our sword. Delegates whispered to each other in disbelief. How can a species without guns, shields, or armies enforce peace? It is impossible, said one. But impossible was exactly what humans had mastered. Across the galaxy, the consequences of this approach became clear. Disputes that might have led to wars were resolved quietly. Pirates and rogue factions surrendered without bloodshed. And allied species began to question the value of their own. Weapon-heavy diplomacy, humans had created a new kind of fear, the fear that their strength could not be measured, the fear that no weapon could match them, the fear that humans could control events and win without ever firing a shot. Council analysts recorded every move, every word, trying to understand how diplomacy could be so effective. But there was no formula they could copy, no technology they could replicate. Humanity's weapon was invisible, silent, unseen, and unstoppable. And for the first time in galactic history, every empire realized that the most dangerous species was not the one with the largest fleet or the deadliest weapons, or the harshest laws. It was the species that could win without ever needing to fight. The galaxy had watched, whispered, and feared for weeks, observing humans solve conflicts without weapons, win negotiations without threats, control outcomes without firing a single shot. But no one truly understood the full truth until it was revealed. Council chambers were tense as Ambassador Kane addressed every species, her voice calm, deliberate, unshakable. Many of you have assumed we are weak, that diplomacy without weapons is a risk, that we are naive, foolish, or careless. You are wrong. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The reason human diplomats never carry weapons is not because we are defenseless, not because we are naive, and not because we cannot fight. We do not carry weapons because we do not need them. We survive, thrive, and succeed because our strength lies elsewhere. In our unity, in our preparation, in our ability to see the consequences of every action before it happens, in our trust in ourselves, in our allies, and in the choices of those who wish to live, not fight. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates paled. Some whispered frantically. Some stared in disbelief. Across the galaxy, empires adjusted their positions. Ships shifted, fleets trembled, advisors debated endlessly. How could a species so young, so unarmed, wield such power? The truth became clear slowly but undeniably. Humanity's strength was invisible, unpredictable, and terrifying to those who relied on brute force. Pirate fleets surrendered without a fight. Rogue states submitted to negotiation. Galactic disputes that would have erupted into war were resolved with patience, foresight, and dialogue. Even spies and intelligence networks could not fully grasp the humans' capabilities. Every move, every contingency, every subtle signal had been calculated in advance. Every diplomat backed by a system no one could see. A network of preparation that made weapons unnecessary. Commander Urek, standing beside Ambassador Kane, whispered softly, "They think we are weak, yet they cannot touch us." Leora nodded, her gaze calm. "Exactly. Our strength is in being unexpected, in being unseen, in winning without firing a shot." Across the council chamber, delegates tried to argue, to predict the humans' next move, to anticipate where they would strike. But there was no strike, only influence, control, and outcome, achieved without bloodshed. The galaxy realized with growing fear that the humans could solve conflicts that would destroy others. They could neutralize threats before they became dangerous. They could unite allies and disarm enemies without lifting a weapon. Even the most powerful fleets, the most brutal empires, the deadliest generals, they had no answers, no strategy to counter this, and that was when the full terror set in.